attending our Chronological Study Bible study. Seems like an unusual thing to say, but it's never a good way to say that. Today, we will begin in chapter 46 of the book of Genesis. It's in Epoch 2. As we remember, we divide these into, the Bible is divided into 9 epochs according to this study Bible. We are in the years 1500 to 2000 BC. It is slow going because there is a lot going on. Several chapters have been devoted to Joseph, and we're not quite through with that. And we've gone through the patriarchs of the Bible, and they are who?
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay, so this, if you'll recall last time, we talked about the fact that Joseph, who is the assistant to the Pharaoh of all of Egypt, and really runs the country except for what the Pharaoh wants to eat. Yes, I like that Pharaoh a lot. Joseph finally disclosed who he was to his brothers, which was a stretch for me, at least. They didn't know who he was, even though they hadn't seen him in many years. But still, and he had a brother, Benjamin, who was special to him for what reason?
Same mother.
Same mother. And one mother had 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And for that reason, Benjamin was also special to who? His father, Jacob, who was also called
Israel.
Exactly. Oh, wow, y'all are. That's awesome. Okay, so Joseph made himself known, and then Joseph went and talked to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh said, "Go get them and bring them." The issue, which we will come to in this today, is that the Egyptians had a problem with sheep herders and people like that. They weren't big on that sort of thing. They were agricultural people, but there was a difference in agriculture and animal husbandry, as it were.
Yes,
I know you didn't know I know that word, but nonetheless, there you go. So he sends the sons back, and he gave each of them. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, load your animals, and return to the land of Canaan, and bring your father and families back to me. I will give you the best of Egypt, the best of the land of Egypt, so you can enjoy the fat of the land. Take some carts for your children and your wives, and get your father and come. Never mind about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours." So the sons of Israel, sons of Jacob, did this. Joseph gave them carts as Pharaoh's commanded, and he also gave them provisions for their journey, new clothing. But to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. This is what he said to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for his journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving, he said, "Don't quarrel on the way." Don't quarrel on the way. So they went out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, "Joseph is still alive. He is ruler of all Egypt." Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. When they told him all the things Joseph had said to them, when he saw the cart Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Spirit revived. Remember, he had that very poetic thing that he said, "My gray hairs will fall down in grief." Now the spirit is revived. I'm convinced, my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. So chapter 46 is about Jacob going to Egypt. So Israel, Jacob, set out with all that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Here we go again, the God of his father Isaac. The reason I'm saying that is this is going to have a little twist to it here in just a second. Because in the next verse, God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." "Here I am," he replied. I am God, God says, the God of your father. Now, this is the first time that God has spoken to someone in all of these people and said, I am the God of your father. They have always said, the God of my father, so-and-so. But now God has said, I am the God of your father. It's interesting, he doesn't say, I am your God. And we still haven't quite come to that, but he says, I'm the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you. I will surely bring you back again. Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. What does that mean?
When he dies, Joseph would close his eyes.
Exactly. That's right. That is an old, still done, but used to be the family, some of the family closed their eyes. And they put money on them to keep them closed. Yes. So then Jacob left Beersheba, and Israel's sons took their father Jacob back and forth, Jacob, Israel, Jacob, and their children, and took their wives in the cars that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. So Jacob and all of his offspring went to Egypt, and it goes on to say, Jacob brought with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons and daughters and granddaughters and all his offspring. Then the rest of the chapter has a lot about these are the names of Israel, Jacob, and his descendants who went to Egypt. Now, in verse 26, at the bottom of the page, if you have your Bible open, it says, all those who went to Egypt with Jacob, those were his direct descendants, not counting his sons' wives. Not counting his sons' wives. He numbered 66 persons, with the two sons who had been born into Joseph in Egypt. The members of Jacob's family which went to Egypt were 70 in all. Now, it's interesting that they don't count his sons' wives. They are not Jacob's descendants. There's a difference there. They counted it differently. Well, you would say, this is my descendant on my mother's side. That's the way we say it now. Or this is my cousin on my father's side, or this is my nephew or niece on my mother. Even weddings. Are you a friend of the bride or the groom's? Right. Remember? And you say, some people say both, and that makes the usher, look confused.
Okay, so
Pick a side.
They pick the side that doesn't have the most people on it. I know exactly what they do. Yeah. Now Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. When they arrived in the region of Goshen, Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, now I'm ready to die, since I've seen for myself that you are still alive. Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and speak to Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, which were living in the land of Canaan, have come to me. The men are shepherds, they tend livestock, and they have brought along with their flocks and herds and everything they own. When Pharaoh calls you in, he's talking to his brothers, and asks, what is your occupation? You should answer, your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on, just as our fathers did. You will then be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen, for all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. So Joseph went in chapter 57 and told Pharaoh exactly what he's already said. And the Pharaoh asked the brothers, what's your occupation? And they told him exactly what they were told to say. And now please let your servants settle in Goshen. Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. And then he says, and if you know any of them among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock. Pharaoh says this. Jacob said to Pharaoh, the years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult. And they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers. They were all older when they died. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. Now this is a sort of thing to call attention to, and if you look if you have one of our Bibles that we're talking about, up at the top right hand of the next page, it says, "Blessed are the blessed." Blessed are the blessed. Bestowing a blessing on another was a common act in the ancient Near East. Inherent in the blessing process was the assumption by both parties that the person giving the blessing was a superior person, was a superiority to the one being blessed. Superiority arose from a relationship to God, who was considered the source of the blessing. God occasionally gave a blessing directly. To pronounce a blessing was not thought of as merely a ceremonial event. Rather, the pronouncement was seen as actually conferring a specific change in status. Since the name and power of God was used, the blessing once given could not be retracted. Remember when Isaac mistakenly blessed
Jacob.
as the firstborn son, his younger son.
That was Israel blessing Joseph.
Yes, that's right. And he said his younger son, he could not reverse the action in order to bless his firstborn. Remember, they fooled him?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little bit interesting. It gives us a little theology into what we do on Sundays. Now, I'm in no way superior to anyone. I'm inferior to most everybody. However, through the actions of being ordained a priest and having oil placed in my hands at my ordination by a bishop of the church they trace back their lineage to the disciples, that allows me to give a blessing. Whereas the deacon, who is supposed to be one of the people. That's why, remember, he comes out and reads the gospel in the midst of the people. The deacon is supposed to represent you to me. The senior warden is supposed to represent me to you if that situation arises. That's the way that's supposed to work. The deacon can give a blessing, but he has to say us. And he can't make the sign of the cross. He has to say us. So if you notice the next time I'm not here, he will say, may the Lord, I'm just using this, may the Lord bless us and keep us, may the Lord make his face. He will not say you. He will not say you. So the theory there is that I'm the only one in this parish who can give the blessing. Now, if the bishop is here, he outranks me because he could attribute his lineage back. And when they are ordained, when they are consecrated a bishop, they are usually given this big plaque, and it says apostle so-and-so to so-and-so, a lineage, right to their name. So that's why when he's here, he gives the blessings. Because he is supposedly, in theology, closer to God than I am, due to his consecration as a bishop. So we still follow this pattern that Jacob had to this day, but this is sort of where we first hear about it. It says, a subordinate could also bless. Years later, Jacob, a foreigner in Egypt, blessed the Pharaoh of Egypt. Since many died at a young age, old age was a sign that God's power resided with the one having a long life. Thus, Jacob, an old man, was superior to the younger Pharaoh who could benefit from Jacob's blessing him. Now, that doesn't hold on to this day because ages are similar, unless there's a problem. Ages are similar, and that's not, we don't think of ourselves as superior because we've lived a long life. However, we do talk about wisdom. We do talk about our relatives who are older and have seen more and done more, and therefore their advice is valued. It should be. And it says, in some versions, the NIV uses the other terms. Blessing God conveys the idea of giving all that a human can rightfully give to God. So we talk about how do we bless God. This came up a year or so ago. how do we bless God? How can we bless God when God already has everything? Everything that we have was given to us by God. So how does that happen? It says, all that a human can rightfully give to God, which is praise. That's why our service is built around praise to God. It's built around the Holy Communion, but it's about praise to God. That's the one thing we can give Him that He didn't give us to start. Isn't that interesting? Thank you. Excuse me. And so we go back and we go back to 47, and it says he's talked to Pharaoh and he blesses Pharaoh. Joseph provided his brothers and father all and the household all with food according to the number of their children. And then we come to Joseph and the famine. This is interesting too, I think, in the way it's written here. There was no food, however, in the whole region because the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan in payment for the grain they were buying, and he brought it to the Pharaoh's palace. When the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was all gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? Our money is all gone." And then Joseph says, "Then bring your livestock. I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock since your money is gone." It sounds like a kind of a hard thing, doesn't it? I mean, at least to me, it sounds kind of hard because Joseph was smart enough to gather all the grain, and these people are the ones who made the grain that he gathered and put in the storehouses so they'd have it during the 7 years of famine. He gathered it during the 7 years of plenty, you recall. He does this, and yet now it's almost like he's holding them ransom. He's holding them for hostage. He's saying, "Give me your money." And it's kind of like we want to say, well, wait a minute, they raised the stuff. Give me your money. Okay, the money's gone. Give me your animals, your livestock. Okay. However, so then it says, when the year was over, they came to him and said, "We don't have livestock, and our livestock belongs to you. We don't have any money. There's nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish before your eyes, we and our land as well? Buy us, and our land in exchange for food, and we with our land will be in bondage to Pharaoh. Give us seed so that we may live and not die, that the land may not become desolate." So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for the Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude. Now, this doesn't sound like the nice Joseph that we know, does it? He reduces the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. However, he did not buy the land of the priests because they received a regular allotment from Pharaoh and had food enough for the allotment Pharaoh gave them from the allotment. That is why they didn't sell their land. Joseph said to his people, "Now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you so you can plant the ground. When the crop comes in, give a fifth to Pharaoh. The other 4/5 you may keep as seed for the fields and food for yourselves and your husbands, your households, and your children." They are thrilled. "You have saved our lives. May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord. We will be in bondage to Pharaoh." So this Pharaoh established it as a law concerning land in Egypt, and it says here, still in force today, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. It was only in the land of priests that did not become Pharaoh's. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen. They acquired property there, were fruitful, increased greatly in number. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147. When the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh," remember that, "and promise that you will show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried. I will do as you say," Joseph says. "Swear to me," he said. And Joseph said to him, and Israel worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. This is another interesting little thing about their way they deal with each other. Sometimes I think that these patriarchs, and Jacob maybe particularly, they're always wanting something. Have you noticed it? They're never just okay. Maybe it's because they live so long and they just, but they're always wanting something, and they always want somebody to speak to them or prove something to them. Maybe it's because they didn't have written contracts like we have. I don't know. Maybe it's for whatever reason, but it seems like it's always a challenging situation, isn't it, between the son and the father, or the other lords or the other people. They're always saying, prove it to me, swear it to me, do this, do that. I want this. Here is Jacob, who has lived, what did you say, 17 years. He was saved from dying. He was saved from starvation. His family, his people were all saved. And yet, it's not enough. He wants one more thing. He wants to be buried back with his people. And then he makes him swear that he'll do it. I wonder why that is. First of all, why was it so important where he was going to be buried? If he believes in God, then he would know that he would be with God, you'd think. So, or did he think that the best thing was to be back with his people? Was that the ultimate thing? What is that about? We don't know. It doesn't say. It just shows that he puts we only have what the Bible says, which says there is a premium on, there was not a premium on lives. We've learned that quickly. No premium on lives. These people, remember just a minute ago, offered themselves up as slaves to not die. Why would Joseph have not just said, there's no need for you to be a slave. Here's the seed. Raise what you do. Give the Pharaoh 1/5. Taxation. We do it every day. Why would he need to put them in servitude? What is it about that? Why would Joseph feel that way? A person who had been in prison, who had been in a well, who had basically been in servitude all his life, even to the Pharaoh, even though he was great at it, but still, he wanted those people, he made them be in servitude to the Pharaoh. And now his father challenges him and said, swear to me that you're going to do what I've asked, because saving my life wasn't enough. It just seems, maybe it's because in that time, their word with each other was more important than anything. As I said, they didn't have written contracts. Maybe it was because their idea of family was so important, except that it just said, Jacob's relatives were so-and-so, not counting the wives of the people. So women obviously had little or no value, except as, to have children. Almost messed up there. I almost used the word broodmare. I decided not to do it. But that's the way they treated them. Is my point. And so I don't quite understand this part in detail, and I'm hoping that as we go through this, we'll come to a better understanding of how their relationships worked, because their relationships affect our relationships. I mean, we just saw where blessings are still in place up at the altar by the one who supposedly is closest to God. I don't necessarily feel that way at all. I don't feel it at all. But according to the theology of it, I get it. And so,
well, in the New Testament, they still had their tombs where the family was buried.
yes,
And
Joseph of Arimathea.
so, that's a hangover from the Old Testament, because all of Jacob's family prior to him were buried in that tomb,
Well,
where they purchased land that had the cave on it.
a lot of people still do that today, I can tell you.
Yeah,
They have family plots,
yeah,
and they go back to the cemetery but they haven't been in that town maybe in 50 years, but they, for some reason, want to be taken back there.
Yeah.
There's some, I guess the question is, I guess it is that there's a peaceful feeling knowing you're going to go back to being where your family before you is.
Right.
Yet you're waiting on the day when Jesus comes again and takes you out of that tomb, out of that grave, out of that plot. Some things are emotional. Tradition, emotion.
Mm-hmm.
They just do it. More people now, I can tell you, are cremated and their ashes are sent back to those plots and buried there instead of the person being taken, the body being taken back.
Yeah.
Because cremation is more popular now and it's less expensive, and they do that.
And relative to all those people being put into servitude, could it have been a safety issue for the people? Because the Pharaoh could have run them out of there and they would have been in worse shape than being in servitude, having the land to work and food to raise and
Could have been,
all
but
that sort of thing.
these were Egyptians now we're talking about in this particular part. So they were in their own country. This talking about the people are buying it from Pharaoh, from Joseph. That's the Egyptians. It says here the Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't think that Pharaoh would send his own people out.
No.
I can understand him sending out Jacob's people. That I could get that. I don't know.
So you think maybe Joseph was thinking that rather than just put his people in servitude, he would put everybody in servitude.
Well, it doesn't say here that his people are in servitude.
He didn't put his people.
It says the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Right here, verse 20. Let's see. And it says in verse 20 and then 21, it says, so Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. In Egypt, remember, they didn't live in it, they lived in Goshen. And the Egyptians, one and all, sold their field. Well, it was Egypt, but different. Because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. However, he didn't buy the priest's land, because they had an allotment from Pharaoh.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be it. I think sometimes that there was a nervousness about it all between the people and Pharaoh and Joseph and all. There was a sort of a nervousness maybe about how it was all going to turn out, how it would be. And I think maybe to what you're saying, they tried to firm this up. But as you recall earlier in Genesis, people lived on the land and gave part of what they did to people like Jacob. They lived in a communal setting.
Yeah.
The Egyptians were much more structured in how they had and it says this, politics and government. The Egyptian state supervised a bureaucracy capable of building pyramids and temples that required thousands of workers and years of effort. They kept meticulous records of commodities and disbursements of food and drink to workers. There were no coins, but they had standard-sized loaves of bread.
Yeah.
That just doesn't sound very nice to me. I don't mean nice. I just don't. Why would I want to build a pyramid for a pharaoh? I guess it's better than dying. I guess. But it was a very. We're talking about so long ago, 1,500 to 2,000 years ago. This is a very, very basic way of life. Basic. A loaf of bread for your work. Grain. And so then in chapter 48, sometime later, Joseph was told, your father is ill, so he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. When Jacob was told, your son Joseph has come to you, Israel rallied his strength and sat upon the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and there he blessed me and said to me, I'm going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give this land as everlasting possession to your descendants after you. Always got this dream going, and it's always the same, isn't it? It's always the same. It's always about God is going to make us fruitful, and we're going to have a good place, and we're going to. And God has said it, and yet they keep talking about it. Now then, your 2 sons born to you in Egypt before I came here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Any children born to you after them will be yours. In the territory they inherit, they will be reckoned under the names of their brothers. And as I was returning to Paddan, my sorrow Rachel died in the land of Canaan while we were still there, a little distance from Ephrath. So I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So he didn't get her back to her family, did he? Nope. And he didn't make anybody promise to get her back. He buried her by the side of the road.
But it was still in the land that had been
I
promised.
get it, but he asked to be sent back to where he.
But that may be because it's the land that was promised.
I don't know.
I don't either.
But so I buried her there beside the road. Gosh, what a terrible way of saying it. When Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, who are these? These are the sons God has given me here. Bring them to me so I may bless them. Now Israel's eyes were failing because of his old age, and he could hardly see, so Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too. Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right and towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left towards Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel reached out his hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was younger, and crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. So he did this.
Mm-hmm.
And he blessed him. Then he blessed Joseph and said, May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, and the angel who has delivered us from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they call by my name the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly on the earth. When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased, so he took hold of his father's hand to move it. Joseph said to him, No, my father, this is the firstborn. Put your hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a great group of nations. He blessed them that day and said, In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers, and I will give you one more ridge of land than to your brothers, the ridge I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow. And then Jacob blesses his sons, and it goes into this great language about it all, and we'll go to that next time because it takes quite a while to go through it. He goes through each child, and he talks about them specifically. He said, Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel, for you went up into your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. Now, we didn't hear this till now.
No, he
Did we hear it?
Yeah.
When Jacob was out of town,
And he went into
Bilhah and slept with her.
Oh, that's right, of course. All right.
Yeah.
So he's claiming him there. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Let their swords of weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hands will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and of the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his coat to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of the grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His borders will extend towards Sidon. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey laying down among the sheep pens. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulders to the burden and submit to forced labor. Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be like a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider tumbles backwards. Look for your deliverance, Lord. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Asher's food will be rich, but he will provide delicacies fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness archers attacked him, and they shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady, his strong arm stayed limber, because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel. Because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you. With the blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours his prey, in the evening he divides the plunder. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving them each blessings appropriate to him. I just want to go back to one thing. It said, Joseph, in verse 22, Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady, and his strong arm stayed limber. Who's he talking about there?
Brothers?
That's right, the brothers. Why didn't he say it?
Because he speaks in poetry.
Interesting, isn't it, though? He's talking about the brothers. He's still talking about the brothers, who are all right there, by the way. He brought them all together, it says.
Yeah.
And he's talking
I
about
knew
them.
what they did.
And he's telling them because of what they did, Joseph has excelled, and because he's excelled, he will be given the greatest blessing. So now we have 12 tribes of Israel. This is important because they still revere these 12 tribes to this day. And the 12 tribes of Israel. And he talks about because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you. So we're moving slowly, but moving towards the creation of the state of Israel. We're coming closer to to rabbis and to more organized religion. Heretofore, there has not been any organized religion. It's all been God speaks to a patriarch, and a patriarch shares his knowledge with his tribe, his group, his community. Now they've been divided up. Jacob has divided them up. He's told them each what their future will be, some good, some not good, some great, some horrible. He's told them all before he dies. And then what we'll see is that as we go forward after Jacob dies, we'll see that Joseph will reassure his brothers, and then Joseph will die at 110 years old. What's happening here that you notice?
Everybody's getting younger when they die.
Exactly. And then we will come to Epoch 3, the rise of a unified people, the founding of Israel. We will come to that after this next Sunday. We'll finish Epoch 2, and then we'll come to Epoch 3, the founding of Israel, and the more organized religion, and that sets the tone for all the rest of Scripture. And because Israel and all of that was where, of course, and then you have where Jesus comes, but that's a long time from now, because Epoch 3 is 1200 to 1500. So we're not moving but about 500 years. But we're coming closer. The kings of this time are more expansionist than were previous Egyptian dynasties. So we will come upon, when we get to this, and it'll be exciting, I think, because when we get to Epoch 3, we're going to come to what great event that happened the first time. It happened twice.
The Exodus?
That's right. We'll come to the Exodus from Egypt. And what happens after the Exodus from Egypt? New countries are formed.
Yeah.
So now we're starting to see, after we get started in Epoch 3, we're going to start to see the first shaping of the Middle East as we know it. We'll see it start to form. So I think that we will get out of these patriarchs, and we will move from Joseph next Sunday, and then from there we will move into all of the things about the Egypt and the Exodus, and we'll be in the book of Exodus. So we are one Sunday away from moving out of Genesis and to the book of Exodus. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.
I do have one interesting question.
All right.
When he gave the blessings and he divided Joseph's between Manasseh and Ephraim, Benjamin was never included, thus he's always called the lost tribe of Benjamin. Why did Benjamin never receive the blessing?
What did it say?
He divided Joseph's between Manasseh and Ephraim to make up the 12, but so therefore Benjamin never got one.
Let's see here.
Not even mentioned.
Not even a mention.
He is a mention. It's chapter 26, verse 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf.
Oh, okay.
In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder.
Okay, he does mention it.
It's interesting, but he sort of made up his mind about all these people.
Way before.